Texas lawmakers promised to fix the grid. Yet months after Governor Abbott signed new reforms into law, ERCOT issued another emergency alert, urging millions to crank their thermostats to 78 degrees, as aging gas plants failed in the summer heat. Abbott claimed the crisis was solved, but the data suggested otherwise. If politicians promised reliability, why are blackouts still looming? And who is truly to blame? The answer starts with one pledge, and the moment it was first put to the test. Governor Greg Abbott stood before cameras in March 2021, flanked by state lawmakers and emergency officials. The words were unambiguous. Texas would fix the grid once and for all. The trauma of Winter Storm Uri was still fresh, with families grieving and homes gutted by burst pipes. Abbott declared grid reform an emergency priority, promising Texans they would never again be left in the cold or dark by state inaction. The pledge quickly took legislative form. In June 2021, Abbott signed Senate Bill 3 into law, surrounded by legislators in Austin. The new statute mandated that all power generators and natural gas producers must weatherize their equipment against extreme cold and heat. The law set a clear deadline. By December 1st, 2021, critical infrastructure had to meet new standards or face fines up to $1 million per violation. The Railroad Commission and Public Utility Commission were ordered to inspect and enforce compliance, with the expectation that no facility could opt out without cause. Abbott's public statements left little room for doubt. He told Texans that everything that needed to be done was done to fix the grid in Texas. The law's language echoed that certainty, requiring operators to prepare for any weather emergency and maintain operations during both freezing and scorching conditions. The December deadline loomed as a benchmark, one by which every promise and every claim of reliability would be measured. For millions across Texas, the pledge and the law became a simple question: would the grid hold the next time it was tested? Just 4 months after the sweeping promises and the signing of Senate Bill 3, the Texas grid faced its first real test. On a sweltering day in June 2021, ERCOT issued a stark conservation alert. The message was blunt: Texans should set thermostats to 78 degrees or higher and avoid using large appliances in the afternoon. The warning came as power demand soared with the heat, but behind the scenes, the grid was already strained. Multiple natural gas and coal power plants were offline for scheduled maintenance right at the peak of summer, leaving fewer generators to meet record demand. ERCOT's own data showed that outages at gas-fired plants accounted for most of the missing capacity, while wind generation actually exceeded its forecast for the period. Yet official statements sidestepped these details. Governor Abbott and his allies pointed to renewables as the scapegoat, blaming wind and solar for the grid's fragility, despite the numbers telling a different story. Texans, who had been assured the grid was now reliable, found themselves once again asked to sacrifice comfort and brace for possible blackouts. The conservation alert lasted several days, forcing families and businesses to weigh each kilowatt hour. For many, it was a jarring reminder that legislative action and confident press conferences had not delivered real security. The gap between political rhetoric and the technical reality of the grid was now on full display, with ERCOT operators scrambling behind the scenes to keep the lights on and the air conditioners humming. On the afternoon of September 6th, 2022, ERCOT's control room became a pressure cooker. The grid's reserves, which are meant to act as a safety net, plunged to just 230 megawatts, a fraction of what is considered safe for a state of nearly 30 million. Operators watched as frequency monitors dipped to 59.92 Hz, brushing up against the threshold that would have triggered automatic statewide blackouts. For nearly an hour, the system teetered on the edge. Every screen in the room tracked rising demand, over 74,000 megawatts, while generators struggled with heat-related outages and derates. The official conservation appeal went out at 3:21 p.m., calling on Texans to cut back immediately. Air conditioners clicked off, factories idled, and the grid barely stayed upright. This was not an isolated scare. In July 2023, ERCOT announced a new all-time demand record, 81 gigawatts. By August 2024, the peak soared to 85.5 gigawatts, with reserve margins repeatedly slipping below 10%. Each time, ERCOT issued public appeals, asking Texans to avoid laundry, unplug appliances, and keep thermostats at 78 or higher. Conservation requests became routine, not rare. The pattern was clear in operator logs and dashboard warnings. The grid was being pushed to its limits, not just by one-off disasters, but by the relentless growth of population and heat. In the control room, every close call left less room for error. For Texans, it meant living with a constant, low-level anxiety, never knowing when the next conservation alert would arrive, or when the lights might go out for good. May 2024 brought a violent derecho storm that ripped through Houston, plunging more than 1 million homes and businesses into darkness. Power lines twisted on the ground for days. In some neighborhoods, the lights didn't return for weeks. Residents lined up for bottled water and ice, using car batteries to charge phones and keep medicine cold. The hum of generators became the only relief from the stifling heat, but not everyone could afford one. Barely 2 months later, Hurricane Beryl slammed into the Texas coast. This time, more than 2.3 million customers lost power. In the worst-hit areas, families endured 2 weeks without electricity as temperatures soared above 100 degrees. For many, there was no escape from the heat. Harris County officials confirmed dozens of deaths linked to heat exposure. Grandparents found in sweltering apartments. Children rushed to hospitals with heat stroke. Maria Lopez, a Houston resident, described watching her grandmother struggle to breathe in their powerless home, waiting for help that never came in time. As the outages dragged on, the bills kept coming. Texans paid an average of 14.6 cents per kilowatt hour in mid-2024, one of the highest rates in the country. Some families faced hundreds of dollars in spoiled food and ruined appliances. Small businesses shuttered, unable to keep inventory cold or doors open. The storms left behind more than debris. They exposed a reality where the promise of a reliable grid felt like a distant memory, and the cost of failure was measured in lives lost and livelihoods upended. Inspection reports from 2024 show most power plants and gas facilities checked off the minimum requirements for winterization, yet enforcement rarely went beyond paperwork. Out of more than 8,700 inspections, only 2 violations were recorded, with fines totaling less than $1 million statewide. Operators often self-reported compliance, and the Railroad Commission accepted these claims without independent verification. Meanwhile, the grid remains isolated from the rest of the country. Texas can import no more than 1.5 gigawatts from neighboring states, a fraction of what is needed during an emergency. Nearly 40% of the state's transmission lines are now over 4 decades old, with little investment in upgrades. No law requires hospitals, water plants, or emergency shelters to have backup power. Official checklists may be complete, but the underlying system is still brittle, leaving millions exposed whenever the next crisis hits. During Winter Storm Uri, the price of electricity in Texas hit an unprecedented $9,000 per megawatt hour. That same market structure remains in place, rewarding scarcity and volatility instead of reliability. In the years since, a new source of strain has surged. Cryptocurrency mining now draws more than 3 gigawatts from the grid, more than some Texas cities. Miners strike deals with ERCOT to get paid for shutting down during emergencies, collecting more than $500 million in curtailment payouts between 2022 and 2024. While ordinary Texans face soaring bills and blackout warnings, these companies profit from instability. The oversight chain runs through the Public Utility Commission, whose members are handpicked by Governor Abbott. Major donations from natural gas and crypto interests flow into campaign coffers, shaping the rules that put industry ahead of everyday customers. Energy economists warn that unless the market is reformed, these distorted incentives will keep pushing the grid to the brink, with Texans left to pay the price. Texas now faces another summer where the grid's weaknesses threaten lives, not just comfort. As demand breaks records and reforms stall, the next blackout is not a question of if, but when. The price of inaction is paid in lives, and that bill keeps coming due. Share your thoughts below.